We are back into the NFL tape, moving on from the draft. Over the second half of the summer, I'm going to be doing team previews, but I wanted to start out by looking at first round picks that I hadn't done full breakdowns on during the season. I did a video on Devon Witherspoon's first start, but wanted to look at his season as a whole, and I think it's one of the better rookie cornerback seasons in recent memory. He was the 5th overall pick in 2023. As a rookie, he had 10 pass breakups, an interception, didn't allow too much in coverage. This graphic shows his 2023 stats and where he ranked out of 100 qualifying corners. He was in the top half of the league in every metric except for penalty rate, which we'll get into later in the video. He made a lot of plays in coverage, did allow 4 touchdowns, but he was in the top 15 in yards per cover snap allowed. He was one of just 5 cornerbacks last year with at least 10 pass breakups and interceptions and less than 0.8 yards per cover snap allowed. The other 4 on that list are Jalen Johnson, Sauce Gardner, L'Jarius Sneed, and Tariq Woolen, but he was really a stat sheet stuffer in every phase. He's a high impact run defender. He's an effective blitzer. He played over 50% of his snaps in the slot, so he's in the mold of a player like Brian Branch or Trent McDuffie, where you just take your most talented defensive back and play him at nickel. Lining him up inside, playing him closer to the ball, that allows him to affect the game at such a higher rate. If you're just stuck on the outside, obviously you can have a positive impact just by playing tight coverage, but to make game-changing plays, you're kind of dependent on the quarterback targeting you. He ranked 4th in a metric that I just completely made up for this video called impact play percentage. Basically, you're just taking the sum of pass breakups, interceptions, sacks, batted passes, forced fumbles, and defensive stops, and then dividing it by total snaps played. And he was one of 5 defenders with at least 7 forced incompletions, 10 run stops, and 3 sacks. The other 4 are Kyle Hamilton, Antoine Winfield Jr., Trent McDuffie, and Fred Warner. So moving on from the cherry pick stats segment and getting into the tape, I think the most impressive thing about Devon Witherspoon's film is his spatial awareness and route recognition in zone coverage. He had a lot of underneath zone coverage responsibilities. Not only was he asked to cover receivers one-on-one, he had to have kind of a linebacker safety type of awareness over the middle of the field. And this play from their second matchup with San Francisco is a perfect example of covering players, not grass, in zone coverage, and having the awareness and route recognition to pick up things that are developing behind him. So the 49ers have Jawan Jennings in kind of this orbit motion. He's going to flare out into a swing route. They've got Deebo Samuel running a stick about 5 yards down the field, breaking outside. This route from Deebo is supposed to influence Devon Witherspoon and get him to widen out to expand this passing window over the middle of the field. He initially connects to the route, but he understands he's got George Kittle stemming out of his field of vision, and Brock Purdy's got his eyes over the middle of the field. If you watch one game of 49ers tape, you'll immediately know this is exactly the type of concept that they try to attack hook zone defenders with. So he's able to not only identify the route, but recover laterally and get into this passing lane. Could have potentially had an interception here, although it would have been a really difficult one. As we'll get into, this is something that I think Devon Witherspoon could have improved on. There were some missed interception opportunities on his tape last year. And then another example from the first 49ers matchup. This is just an incredible example of spatial awareness and reaction time from Devon Witherspoon. So there's 4 receivers running routes on this play. The 2 that are most important are Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. They're playing a sort of match cover 3 where Witherspoon has what would be called a mod responsibility in a lot of defenses, meaning man on deep. So if Deebo Samuel took an outside release and ran a go, that would be Devon Witherspoon's responsibility. But because Deebo takes an inside release and runs an underneath route, that's no longer Witherspoon's assignment. He stays in the deep third and starts to look for other routes from the opposite side of the field. Brandon Ayuk's coming across on this deep over. Witherspoon doesn't initially have the best angle on this route, but you can see from the end zone view, this is an insane adjustment mid-play. He sees Brock Purdy release the ball. He knows at his current angle, he's going to lose leverage on this route. So he makes the mid-air trajectory calculation, bends his path back outside, sticks his hand out at the perfect time and perfect location, and it bounces right off the back of his hand. This kind of play is the reason that you take Devon Witherspoon with a top 5 pick. There's a lot of corners that can just be a assignment secure and zone coverage, but not very many that have these kind of playmaking instincts. Another really impressive adjustment on this play against Baltimore, they motion into 4 strong, just meaning 4 receivers on the side of the passing strength, and then they're running a switch release wheel concept with Rashad Bateman releasing inside of Devon Witherspoon, so he's crossing his field of vision and hopefully influencing him to carry that route into the end zone. And then you've got the number 3 receiver, Mark Andrews, who's going to run a wheel and ideally be uncovered. Initially, Witherspoon carries this route from Rashad Bateman, but he keeps a healthy distance so that he can play both routes. And then at the last second, he's able to turn, switch assignments, make a play on the ball. Another example of a play that if he came down with this, it would be one of the best interceptions of the year, but instead it's just a really good pass breakup that kind of gets lost in history. But still, pretty much everything on this play up until actually catching the ball is really impressive from Devon Witherspoon. Right here, the Cardinals are running a stick speed out from Rondale Moore. Devon Witherspoon's in the flat. He sees the route development, makes a quick break, and lays a huge hit near the line of scrimmage. And then the final true zone coverage example, right here, he's playing the hook curl. The Cardinals are running a dagger concept where they've got a seam from the number 2 and then a dig route behind it from the number 1. He does a great job of not getting too much depth with this seam route, so he's still in position to play the dig. He doesn't really break quickly enough to get the interception and, use those initial steps to establish catch space. So the receiver's still able to work in front of him and make a play on the ball, but he's at least in good position to force the incompletion. Another thing that really stands out about Devon Witherspoon is his closing burst and his skill playing the ball at the catch point. Like I said, there have been some missed interception opportunities, but as far as raking at the ball, being disruptive at the catch point, I think Devon Witherspoon has everything that you look for. You see on this drag route to Jamar Chase, he's leading with his arms fully extended, punching at the ball. Another example here against the Commanders of having that burst to close space quickly, but he isn't just trying to hit the target as hard as possible. He arrives under control, reaches into the catching window, gets a pass breakup. You see this consistently on his tape, especially when he's playing off coverage. Receivers just do not have a high success rate in contested catch situations against Devon Witherspoon. And then one more play, this time he's covering Terry McLaurin on a deep stop route. Really good job synchronizing his movements with the route break, and then he covers a lot of ground with these initial few steps after he decelerates to get into the passing lane. Again, doesn't come down with the interception, but still a really nice play. The final coverage related strength I want to discuss kind of blends into the other areas of his game, but it's just covering underneath routes and being a presence defending the flat. You see right here against the Panthers, they run a jailbreak screen. Adam Thielen's trying to seal him off to the sideline, but he takes a pretty steep angle. Witherspoon's able to undercut that and make the tackle for no gain. He's a player where if you throw a check down in front of him, the receiver's going to have to work to even get back to the line of scrimmage. Just a really physical tackler, doesn't shy away from contact at all. This applies to his run defense, his pass rushing as well, but it's just amazing that Devon Witherspoon weighs 181 pounds. Based on the way that he plays, I would have said 195. There's just hardly any element of his game where size is any sort of limitation for him. He's already one of the better run defending corners in the NFL. As a nickel, he's going to be in the run fit a lot more often, and he had no issues playing off of blocks. Like I said, already one of the more physical tacklers of any defensive back in the NFL. He leaves a mark on impact, and honestly, I just forget that he's 180 pounds until I see his weight listed somewhere. This is a really nice play against Washington. Sam Howell keeps it on the read option. Witherspoon stays engaged. Eventually, he's able to rip the ball out, and Tariq Woolen recovers. And then this play against Pittsburgh, you see just the relentless pursuit speed to chase down Jalen Warren, get like a 5-yard loss. Devon Witherspoon's a player that rewards his defensive coordinator every time he sends him on a blitz. But speaking of blitzing, Witherspoon was also a very productive pass rusher as a rookie. Only had 30 pass rushing opportunities, but he turned that into 10 pressures and 3 sacks. He also had 3 batted passes as well. It's not only the timing and the closing speed, he's also physical with his hands to work around blocks from even offensive tackles and guards. He just never stops moving his feet and closing in on the quarterback. And then, like I said, he's got the awareness to understand when he's not going to get home in time, stick his hands up and get a batted pass. Getting into some of the bad with Devon Witherspoon, some of the things I think he can improve on in his second year. He gave up 4 touchdowns in 2023. The first one came in his first career start. The Lions took advantage of his aggressiveness against the run, got him with a flea flicker. I didn't see really any other negative plays as far as being too aggressive, biting on play action, or getting beat by a trick play or anything like that. So that kind of thing isn't really a major concern for me going forward. I think the main thing he really needs to improve is route recognition and getting clean breaks from off-man coverage. 2 of his touchdowns, he was playing outside leverage against an in-breaking route against one of the best receivers in the NFL. This first one, Brandon Ayuk spray releases to even out the leverage. He shakes him a little bit at the top of the route by threatening to break outside. That gets Witherspoon to turn his hips, lean outside. He has to grab at Brandon Ayuk's jersey. Ayuk accelerates out of this in break. Witherspoon can't keep up with him, and he gets a touchdown. And similar play here against CeeDee Lamb. Again, he's got outside leverage, so Lamb spray releases to even out that leverage. He doesn't really do anything fancy at the top of the route. Witherspoon's just leveraged a little bit too far outside, and he's a tick slow responding to the break, and Lamb's able to separate over the middle and get a touchdown. Outside of that, he didn't have many negative plays in coverage. Compared to some other corners, he didn't have as many deep coverage responsibilities. It was a lot more shallow zone drops than you usually see. So I think his exposure was limited somewhat based on the role that he was playing in Seattle's defense, but it makes sense to have him in that role, and you can't really knock a player for what they're asked to do. The other negatives I had were a lot more minor. I don't think he was a bad tackler by any means, but there were some bad tackle attempts on his tape as a rookie. He's one of these players that's just around the ball constantly, so the occasional missed tackle is expected just because of how many opportunities you have. You obviously want him to make every single tackle, but you can't get excited about the big hits and then really fixate on the one miss that he has every 2 or 3 weeks or something. This play against Gus Edwards was one of the few times that I felt like it was evident on tape that he was 181 pounds. And the Pittsburgh game, he also had some missed tackles, which was kind of the norm for Seattle's defense that week. And final thing to discuss is penalties. Like I said earlier, it was the one stat where he didn't rank in the top half of the league. He had 5 penalties last year, and dating back to college, that's been kind of a consistent issue for him. I watched all of his penalties, and to be honest, I'm not very concerned that that's a major issue for him going forward. I'm generally kind of biased towards defensive backs when it comes to penalties, but I thought these were some of the softest calls of anyone I've watched all year. This first one against the Panthers is just a standard soft shoe press coverage rep. Doesn't make contact at the line of scrimmage. Once he gets a little bit downfield, Witherspoon throws up this inside hand. He's not really grabbing here. He's just feeling out the route, which is perfectly legal. DJ Chark does a good job of releasing contact. There isn't an exaggerated jersey grab or anything. This to me is just standard hand fighting between a receiver and a corner. This play against the Lions, you could maybe make an argument is a penalty. When you've got these off coverage or catch coverage reps where the corner's giving cushion and then the receiver's releasing right at the corner's initial alignment, it's always kind of difficult how you legislate that. With a receiver stemming directly towards you, like you can't just put your hands behind your back. You're going to make contact in some way. A lot of times the receiver is actually the one that initiates the contact. This is kind of just a sloppy route to me by the receiver. You'd like Witherspoon to be cleaner with his hands, but I don't have a huge issue with this play. This next one, he's covering Puka Nacua on a shallow cross in the red zone. Nacua gets tripped up by incidental contact here. I don't see this as a penalty. And then he also got a flag in the same game just for being too physical of a tackler. I get if this is a penalty by the rules, like for player safety, but just as far as evaluating Devon Witherspoon, it's about the least concerning type of penalty that you could have. I would be surprised if Seattle's coaches even negatively graded him on this play. So that's Devon Witherspoon. I think one of the better rookie corner seasons that I've watched. Seattle's taking the common strategy of just moving your best defensive back into the slot, getting him close to the ball, and letting him just make a bunch of plays. I would be interested to see him in more traditional press man coverage type of situations, but for Mike Macdonald's defense, I think he's a perfect fit. He's going to use him in that Swiss Army knife type of role, and if he can just start converting a few more of these interception opportunities, I could honestly see Devon Witherspoon making a defensive player of the year push.